the same thing will happen. And all we're going to do today is lift the lid up a little bit, shine the light into a very dark, dirty bucket, and let you see some of the critters that are crawling around in that thing.
The most vile, disgusting critters. It's a tough subject to research. I mean, it's just disgusting. And the sad part about it is who's involved. I mean, these are top level people.
Well, let's talk about who's involved. We're talking about Jeffrey Epstein.
No one knows who he is, probably. You know, I mean, he's not that well known if it wasn't for this case.
But here in Florida, he's a well-known person.
Right.
Very wealthy, influential, well-connected businessman in South Florida, down in Palm Beach County, just about an hour south of us. Well-connected, a Jewish businessman with some very important, powerful friends who have gotten him out of trouble. So he was accused by some young women who said that when they were teenagers, they were recruited into a sex trafficking ring that Jeffrey Epstein ran.
Yes, the date 2005 was the first time this was brought to the authorities.
Yes.
A 14-year-old girl with her parents went to the authorities and said that she was molested, had sexual encounter with Epstein at a mansion.
14 years old. 14. And I think that what I've read, the youngest victim was 13. But this has been going on. As you said, that was 2005.
Right.
Epstein, finally, he got a slap on the wrist. Mm-hmm. He got convicted, but the federal prosecutor in South Florida, in Miami, the U.S. federal prosecutor cut a sweetheart deal. Epstein served 13 months in a posh federal prison, and actually he was on work release. He was released from the prison throughout the day.
Yes, he just had to spend the night in jail, basically.
Right.
But he could travel to other islands. He could travel to his island. He could.
Yeah, while he was in prison, he was traveling to his mansion in the Caribbean.
It's just
this what he was accused and found guilty on. This is a life sentence. This is what he should have been given a life sentence. But this just came out because a judge ruled that there was a violation of the Crime Victims' Rights Act, because when he received this deal, the victims were not told about this. So they have to let them know that there's going to be a plea deal and let them know. The
victims thought the feds were going to lock him up.
Sure.
Jane Doe number 1 said, "I can't remember how I found out that he had taken a plea." There was no one who brought it to her attention.
They were actually told that the feds were continuing, the FBI was continuing to deepen its investigation into Epstein's sex trafficking ring. The truth is, while the feds were lying to the young women, the feds were closing the case, sealing the documents, and protecting Epstein.
Now, Matt, you're a recent addition to the Trunews team, and so you don't have the history that even a lot of listeners do. We've talked about this for almost a decade, right?
Some of the players in this story, I can go back to 2003.
So, and even up until last year, it finally, you'd think, once again, we go through those cycles, it looks like something's going to happen. But even last year, it kind of died out again. It kind of just puttered out again. But something happened earlier this year, and that was during the confirmation hearing for William Barr. And one of the things he said, if he was, made Attorney General, was that he was going to be looking into this whole process of how that Jeffrey Epstein got this deal. Now, Rick, who was this U.S. prosecutor or this attorney that made this deal with Jeffrey Epstein?
He was Alexander Acosta, who now is the Secretary of Labor in the Trump administration.
So so let me get this straight. So the U.S. attorney that made the deal with this, really a pedophile, made this deal.
Powerful, rich, Jewish pedophile.
And so
right.
he made this deal, and now he's in the president's cabinet. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
to me?
he was nominated by President Trump to be Secretary of Labor. A few senators brought up the Epstein deal during the confirmation hearings. Senator Ben Sasse was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And, but he was confirmed. And, Secretary Acosta's position is, hey, I got a conviction. We settled the case. But really, he made sure that Epstein got the lightest sentence possible.
He was convicted on 2 state charges, and all the victims thought there would be federal. I mean, this is involving taking women across state lines. It's a federal crime, right? And he was charged with 2 state crimes.
Yeah. So that's what they got: minor state convictions, and then the feds closed the case on the federal side. And Mr. Acosta was the man involved. Now, what happened is the judge that made this ruling a week or two ago, he came within a hair of voiding that plea bargain.
Yeah.
That judge could do that. He could say this entire arrangement between Alexander Acosta's U.S. attorney and Jeffrey Epstein, that arrangement was illegal, because it violated the federal law for the protection of victims.
Right.
And so the judge was furious over this. And it's possible, I mean, we could see this happen where the judge nullifies that agreement, and then Epstein's back on the hook again and could be facing major time in prison. But there's another big name in here. Jeffrey Epstein's attorney was Alan Dershowitz.
Alan Dershowitz?
Alan Dershowitz, the Fox News contributor,
Yep.
the guy who shows up at Trump rallies and famous. There he is, Alan Dershowitz, with Jeffrey Epstein, his client. And now Alan Dershowitz is fighting off allegations because one of the young women, who was a teenager at the time.
Yes, Victoria Roberts.
She is openly accusing Dershowitz of molesting her. And now Mr. Dershowitz is denying it.
Yeah.
But the young woman is telling the judge it was Alan Dershowitz who sexually assaulted me.
She had a diary. She kept a diary of her time there. And another player that we'll get into was that was involved with this was Epstein's right-hand man, but she was a woman hand, I guess you'd say. Mm-hmm. Well, she would find these young women and groom them and get them to a level where she could send them out to go get other women. The Miami Herald has done a really good job of documenting and following this case. I have to commend them. They've really done an outstanding job and stayed with this case, because a lot of times the conviction will happen and they'll just bury it. It's done, but they've kept at it. We actually have a clip from the victim. They did an interview with her, and she shares her story on how she was groomed and what happened.
And the interview was recorded by the Miami Herald?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, let's watch it.
Virginia Roberts was working in the spa at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach when British socialite Ghislaine Maxwell introduced her to multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein.
The training started immediately. How to be quiet, be subservient, give Jeffrey what he wants. A lot of this training came from Ghislaine herself. And being a woman, it kind of surprises you that a woman could actually let stuff like that happen, but not only let it happen, but to groom you into doing it. You're just thrown into a world that you don't understand, and you don't know how to, you're screaming on the inside, and you don't know how to let it come out. And you just become this numb figure who refuses to feel and refuses to speak and refuses, all you do is obey. That's it. And eventually, it led to, well, now we're gonna experiment and we're gonna try you with another guy and see how you go. So they sent me to an island with a professor, and I basically had to do what I did for Jeffrey for him. So it's very private. It's the perfect world for a billionaire getting away with what he was doing. He could hold big parties there and have huge orgies there, and nobody would have any idea what was going on because it was so quiet and so protected. And it started with one, and then it trickled into two, and then so on and so forth. And you know, before you know it, I'm being lent out to politicians and to academics and to people royalty.
Roberts claimed in an affidavit the two of the men that Epstein lent her out to were attorney Alan Dershowitz and Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. Dershowitz and Prince Andrew have both denied any involvement with Roberts. A judge later struck Roberts' affidavit from the court record, but the ruling did not address the veracity of her allegations. Dershowitz said he was nonetheless vindicated. Logs from Epstein's private jet, nicknamed the Lolita Express, show a host of high-powered politicians, academics, and celebrities.
It's called Lolita Express for a reason. That was a vessel for him to be able to abuse girls and get away with it without anybody being alarmed or any alarm bells going off. It was all the same no matter where you went. All Jeffrey cared about was, go find me more girls. To me, still to this day, it is my biggest shame that I carry around that I will never get rid of. And I'm really, really sad that I brought other girls my age and even younger into a world that they should have never been introduced to.
Now that full video, Rick, I watched it all. It was about 12 and a half minutes long. They go into detail. This wasn't just a handful of girls. We're talking literally hundreds in New Mexico, in Paris, the famous, but Orgy Island, St. James Island in the Caribbean, not only Palm Beach. List of literally hundreds of girls, phone numbers and names from logs, from all, going all across the United States. If he was in Beverly Hills, he had a list. If he was at his home in New Mexico, he had a list. If he was at his home in Paris, he had a list.
Yes.
And so the more you watch it, it just weighed you down so much, and you realize hundreds.
Large-scale sex trafficking network.
That's what it is. So her story, she was sent to Thailand to go bring a little girl back to the island or back to wherever they were. While she was there, she met a man, and they fell in love, and she married this man from Australia, calls Jeffrey up and says, I'm done. I'm not coming back. And he tells her, like, have a good life or whatever he said. And she escaped. But they had called her and tracked her down and said, you better be quiet about this. So that's how she left this whole lifestyle.
The judge in this case is here in Palm Beach County. Judge Kenneth Mara, Palm Beach County, federal judge, U.S. District Judge. He ruled last week that federal prosecutors under former Miami U.S. Attorney Alexander Acosta, now the Attorney General, the Labor Secretary, broke the law when they concealed a plea agreement from more than 30 underage girls in Palm Beach who had been sexually abused by Epstein. Pardon me. The paper said, this Miami Herald, Judge Mara, in a 33-page opinion, said prosecutors not only intentionally violated the U.S. Crime Victims' Rights Act, but misled the girls.
Misled them.
The prosecutors, federal prosecutors, misled the girls into believing that the FBI's sex trafficking case against Epstein was ongoing, when in fact, prosecutors had secretly closed it after sealing the plea bargain from the public record. Judge Mara stopped short of voiding the agreement, which granted Epstein and an untold number of accomplices immunity from federal prosecution for sex trafficking crimes, provided that Epstein plead guilty to minor charges in Florida state court.
And now the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami has recused themselves from the case. They're passing it off up to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Atlanta now, because they've removed themselves, because they're under such scrutiny now because of all the activities that now are being charged against them, levied against them, that they're being forced now to give this case over for all the victims rights cases, up to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Atlanta. This is a mess, isn't it?
It's a mess, and it gets really, really deep because it involves spies.
Yes, and the people who are involved, they definitely don't want their name to be leaked out and to be put into the court system.
What are some of the names that were in his black book?
He had so his housemaid, this man who would pick up the trash after his sex parties, his name was Alex Rodriguez. He was in possession of the black book, and they called it the Holy Grail. Right. Okay, so Alfredo Rodriguez is his name. Well, here are the names. This is reported by the DailyMail.com, revealed that Rodriguez kept the black book of all his contacts called the Holy Grail or the Golden Nugget. In the book were President Bill Clinton, Mick Jagger, Donald Trump, Earl Spencer, Barbara Walters, Harry Kissinger, and 3 members from the Kennedy family.
Henry Kissinger?
Henry Kissinger.
Now, what's ironic about this gentleman, he was Epstein's butler, you know. What's really ironic is actually he served jail time because he refused to turn over that black book to prosecutors. He wanted a payment for it. So he ended up actually going to jail himself and serving time. I believe it was 13 months that he served. And so I thought it was ironic that this gentleman who had the black book and didn't turn it over actually served almost as much time as the perpetrator of the crime.
He fell on his sword.
Yes.
So that the
Contents didn't
the
come
syndicate didn't take him out for squealing.
Well,
he was a good soldier.
Well,
all right.
He was taken out by. Now he died. He's dead. Now they say it was from cancer. Was it introduced cancer to him? Who knows? But he's no longer here.
So he's no longer a player in this game.
Just another one who was a low-profile individual that we see so many times in cases like this wind up dead. Some with gunshots to their back, self-inflicted gunshots to their back. But this one was cancer, so they say.
So Epstein's connected to famous entertainers like Mick Jagger. He's connected to political people like Henry Kissinger, media people, Barbara Walters.
Yes.
Why would Barbara Walters be in a black book that involves girls being prostituted?
If we had any form of media or sleuth, they'd go ask her. Doesn't she work for the media?
Yeah, she's a very powerful person, and she's married to Alan Greenspan, right? Federal Reserve. Donald Trump's name is in the book. Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton was said to have gone there 20 times. And it's registered.
To Orgy Island.
It's registered in the flight log 20 times.
And there's a picture of him on the Lolita Express,
yes, we have a picture of him with a girl who was on the Lolita Express. Now, he would leave his detail, he would somehow get his detail because, you know, presidents and ex-presidents have a detail with them at all times. Well, he'd find ways to maneuver to get away from them and then fly off to, there's a picture, Lolita Express, and to this Orgy Island.
So President Bill Clinton went to this St. James Island, what was it, 20 times?
It says 20 times.
Hillary Clinton
I'm sure they were fundraising events.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Hillary Clinton went 6 times. So her name has popped up on the flight logs and in the information process where
Kevin
she
Spacey,
actually went.
He was on there.
You know, back in 2016, I know that we were looking into the Epstein Orgy Island in the Caribbean, and I remember Edward was doing a lot of investigation about it, and they have a a religious temple shrine-like building on the island.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we had to get back in the old Trunews records here today
There it
and
is.
pull up some of the
That's
images
it?
that we had.
That's it. It looks like a temple.
Doesn't it look like a temple there?
And if you really zoom in on the top left and right, it looks like an owl, like a Moloch statue. It's kind of hard to tell on this one, but if you zoom in,
See, you mean it could be possibly a Freemason temple?
this has
but-
creepy written all over
It
it.
has a gold dome. It has blue and white colors on it. Has a maze that you can follow on the outside, a labyrinth. Limited
You're not
access.
suggesting that the rich and powerful people of the world are involved in Satanism, are you?
I could make that inference, Rick. There's
And you're
something
not-
weird going on here for sure.
And certainly they wouldn't sacrifice young girls inside their temple, would they?
It's been the underlying. This has been out, or not out, I should say, but there's been talk of this for so long, but it's never come out to this far. This is probably as far in the public eye as it's been. Where we're in court now and we have affidavits filed, but look what happened when they got so close. Let's seal it up. Let's send in our attorneys, some attorneys who were involved in the case.
And Alan Dershowitz does not want the news media to be permitted in the courtroom.
Yes, that's why he went there to silence it. That's what he did. Why would he be so involved in this case?
Well, that's where we want to take this conversation next.
Okay.
Who would want to have this kind of control and power over the shakers and movers in politics and media? Jeffrey Epstein, I mean, would he just keep a black book like that just so he could maneuver people around? It doesn't seem to me like he is that person, like the mastermind of some sort of organization that is trying to, if you had pictures or video, let's say, of people that were at these events, you could blackmail them, you could hold it against them. But I just don't get the impression this whole process here, and even the conversation related to his prosecution, that he is the player, is he?
No, he's not. If the next logical step in this story for our audience is to talk about a woman who recruited a young girl at Mar-a-Lago,
Right.
President Trump's residence in Florida, in Palm Beach County.
The woman we saw in the clip we showed, this is the woman who...
Is that her?
Yes.
Now,
She was the one who was recruited at Mar-a-Lago.
Yes.
And she was working at Mar-a-Lago as...
well, her father was a maintenance worker there at Mar-a-Lago, and she was working there part-time,
Yes.
helping out with different things. You know, they have like bus waiters and stuff like that. And so she got a job there, and one time while she was there, I guess Ghislaine Maxwell, who was I don't know how you can describe Ghislaine
She's a
Maxwell.
socialite. That's what
Right,
she
yes.
is.
She's a Ghislaine Maxwell,
Yeah,
a very rich, well-connected socialite. And
The best way to describe her is Jeffrey Epstein's friend. I don't know how
They call her
some people call her Madam.
Yes,
So-
she was there always. She was there, and she was there recruiting young
But
girls.
at Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
That's
Why was she at Mar-a-Lago recruiting teenage girls?
well.
Look, I know going to upset people, but I'm after the truth. I'm after the truth.
That's what we're called to do. Go after the truth.
That's right. So Ghislaine Maxwell, rich, well-connected socialite, recruited a teenage girl who was working part-time at Mar-a-Lago, recruited her into Jeffrey Epstein's sex
And groomed her.
and groomed her.
Yes.
Recruited her into Epstein's sex network.
Yes.
Groomed her. And, but why was Ghislaine Maxwell, why did she have access to Mar-a-Lago? So that's a valid question, right?
She was connected to Jeffrey Epstein at the time.
Yes, but why was Epstein? Why would Epstein send his madam over to the Trump residence and say, hey, look around and see if there are any nice, new, pretty young girls there? That's a valid question that needs to be asked.
does.
Okay?
It does.
So the next step in this process, who is Ghislaine Maxwell? Because she's more than a socialite. She's more than a well-connected, rich woman. She is the daughter of the late Robert Maxwell, who was a wealthy businessman in Great Britain. This book right here, Robert Maxwell, Israel's Super Spy, written by Gordon Thomas, my good friend. I interviewed Gordon many, many times. Most fascinating man I ever interviewed.
Wow.
Gordon Thomas
awesome.
was,
I have to go read
was
this.
astounding.
Yes.
The connections that Gordon Thomas had.
Brave, too.
I had to assume he was very brave, and I have to assume that Gordon Thomas wrote for MI6. I never asked him, "Are you on the payroll of MI6?" But he had so much detailed knowledge about spies in other countries. Never Great Britain. They were always in other countries. All right.
So what was his thesis about Robert Maxwell?
Robert Maxwell, again, a wealthy businessman in Great Britain. He owned the Mirror newspaper, and he started back in. Actually, Maxwell played a role in the 1948 Israel-Arab War,
right.
And it was Robert Maxwell who persuaded Czechoslovakia to sell weapons to the Israeli terrorists.
Right, and airplane parts.
When I said, you hear what I said, the Israeli terrorists, because the Israelis were terrorists in the 1940s. They were terrorists. They were like ISIS in the 1940s. And so Robert Maxwell persuaded Czechoslovakia to sell weapons to the Israeli terrorists who were killing the Arabs in their quest to establish a Jewish state in Israel.
He was also selling airplane parts to them through Czechoslovakia as well. He was born in Czechoslovakia.
Yes.
But he persuaded the Czechs to sell airplane parts, and that gave the Israeli terrorists air superiority over the Arabs during that conflict.
Maxwell also played an important role in the Israeli Mossad's involvement in the takedown of Mikhail Gorbachev.
Yeah,
This guy was deeply involved in espionage and spying and covert operations. Now, I don't know if you know this. One of his early companies, Doc got a kick out of this.
Yes.
What was the name of his corporation?
Well, he actually, after the war, by the way, his real name wasn't Robert Maxwell. That
was his Gentile name.
His full name was Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hoek.
Yeah.
So that's his whole name.
So they give him a Gentile name, so
Right.
nobody knows that they're Jewish businessmen working with the Israeli Mossad.
So he took on the name Robert Maxwell. Well, one of the first companies that he started was one called Pergamon Press. Basically, he bought out another company and renamed it. He bought out, right. I'll explain that here in a second.
Powerful, right?
Pergamon Press.
It basically just dealt with scientific papers and republishing them and everything, and he changed it from this previous name to Pergamon Press. Now, for you Bible scholars out there, if you know anything from the book of Revelation, chapter 2, you know about the church of Pergamos, which was called Satan's throne, or Satan's seat
of Satan.
The seat of Satan.
You didn't know that, did he?
Yeah.
That's coinkydink.
Another quinky-dink. So Robert Maxwell, his fake name, started a corporation called Pergamon Press.
Satan's throne press.
Satan's seat press. And he was a publisher of books and the news. And I'll give you an example. As the publisher of the Mirror newspaper,
Yes.
an Israeli whistleblower, Mordecai Vanunu, who was a Jewish man in Israel, later converted to Christianity. Mordecai Vanunu blew the whistle on Israel's secret arsenal of nuclear weapons.
Really?
He worked inside Dimona. Dimona is Israel's top secret nuclear facility. He took documents to Robert Maxwell, not knowing that he's a Jewish man, because his name is Robert Maxwell now, okay? And he knows that he owns the Mirror newspaper in London, and he says, I have the biggest story of the century. Here is evidence of Israel's secret arsenal of nuclear weapons, and you can publish it. You'll get the Nobel Peace Prize. You'll be the most famous person. Guess what Robert Maxwell did? He called his employer the Mossad.
Wow.
And said, I have one of your guys in here from Dimona, and he just gave me a box full of secret documents. And the Mossad lured Mordecai Vanunu to Italy. And they used a woman, who said, hey, Mordecai, let's hook up in Italy. Let's get together and spend the weekend. And so Mordecai takes off and flies to Italy. And when he got to Italy, they sprung the trap on him, took him back to Israel, sentenced him for treason, and he went to prison for 18 years. When he was in prison, he converted to Jesus Christ. But he is considered a traitor in Israel because he outed Israel, because Israel has never admitted that they have hundreds of nuclear weapons. They want Iran to shut down their nuclear reactor, but they won't even admit that they have a nuclear arsenal. So Robert Maxwell played a very important role in that big story. Maxwell worked for the Israeli Mossad. Right? So think about what I just told you. He's running a major newspaper in London, but nobody knows he's an Israeli Mossad agent.
Yes.
He's the publisher. Does this confirm what I've been telling you for years, that many of the big news organizations are run by spy agencies?
And not only did he run his empire there in the UK, here in the US he owned Macmillan Publishing, which included Collier Book Group. These are big names,
yes.
Okay? He also owned the Berlitz Language Group. And, so
yes.
every language course that you
Berlitz,
had back
yes.
in the 60s and
That's
70s,
right.
he owned that. He also was the unique publisher of about 95% of all the travel guides you would find anywhere in any airport or a rest stop or anywhere else, anywhere in the United States, through a subsidiary of Macmillan Publishing.
I know something else he did for money. He made a lot of money at it. He stole American national security secrets for Israel. He stole them out of Los Alamos, New Mexico.
How do you do that?
You had to go back and listen to my interviews with Gordon Thomas. I found one of those interviews from 2003, and Doc, if we can put it on Trunews today and put it on YouTube.
I'll get it up tonight.
It's a 2003 interview that I did with Gordon Thomas about Robert Maxwell.
Okay.
Well, Maxwell was in charge of an American operation of Israeli spies to infiltrate Los Alamos. So they were getting nuclear secrets. And guess who they were using? Guess who was giving the Israeli spies access to Los Alamos? And he wasn't a former at the time, he was in office, former late U.S. Senator John Tower of Texas. John Tower was helping the Israeli spies. John Tower, the Republican, a little short,
yes.
John Tower.
The Tower Commission Tower.
Yes, the Tower, yeah. John Tower was a traitor to America.
But isn't Israel our friends? Aren't we?
Well, so I think where we're trying to show our audience, we're working our way there. You're going to figure this out. How did they get like a conservative Republican senator to betray America? Well, it has to do with things like sex networks,
yes,
underage girls, okay? So John Tower, his political career came to an end. There was a scandal, and he was forced out. I personally believe that our intelligence agencies took him down. They knew what he was doing. All right, that was kind of a compromise way to get him out of the way and, move him out without, absolutely destroying him and saying a U.S. senator was working for Israel. Okay.
Are there any other names that are involved in this?
Oh yeah, this goes really deep. Okay, so back, and I'm kind of like refreshing my memory of 20 years of True News.
Right.
So there was a company in Washington, D.C. called Inslaw, INSLAW.
Okay.
Capital, all caps, okay? Now, many years ago, back when I was in sales and marketing, Inslaw was one of my clients.
What'd they do?
They produced software. They made software, and they sold it to government agencies. The founder was Bill Hamilton, William Hamilton. He was actually one of my clients. I was probably, I don't know, 30 years old, something like that, and he was one of my clients. And so anyhow, that was my connection with Inslaw. It's just I did business with them. Okay, good organization. Well, then years later, when I had started True News, this is like early 2000s, Inslaw is back in the news. You guys are going to flip out when you hear this. Bill Hamilton created a software called Promise, Promis.
Okay.
This was a people tracking software.
In the early 2000s?
Well, he actually made it probably in the 90s, okay? And he made it for the Justice Department to track felons, to track prisoners. And this is how I knew him as a client, because he was selling the software to government agencies to track, people that had been released on probation and things like that.
Right.
So it's a long story. Gordon Thomas tells the story in the Maxwell book. Okay. Because the U.S. Justice Department was Inslaw's biggest client, the U.S. Justice Department set up Bill Hamilton and brought in an Israeli spy into his office who happened to be, I think, if I recall, happened to be maybe the head of Mossad, one of the highest Mossad agents, but didn't tell Bill Hamilton this guy is an Israeli Mossad agent. The Mossad agent stole the Promise software with the help of the U.S. Justice Department. Now, Bill Inslaw, and I interviewed Bill many years ago, probably 2004, probably is when I interviewed him, and he told the story of how the U.S. Justice Department betrayed him, worked alongside the Israeli Mossad spy agency to penetrate his company and steal his software. He filed a lawsuit against the Justice Department. Let me tell you, I'm going to give you the names of 3 attorney generals who handled this case. Dick Thornburg.
Okay.
William P. Barr.
You mean the current?
The current attorney general, and Janet Reno.
Jeez.
Because this thing spanned over a number of years. Okay.
How deep is it?
So William P. Barr knows all about Inslaw and Bill Hamilton and Jeffrey Epstein and Mossad, because he's an old hand at this stuff. He's the Bush family trustee. He's the trustee for the Bush family dynasty. Okay. That's why he's back in the saddle.
There you go.
To take care of all these things, because there was a settlement at the Bush funeral. A truce was made to make sure certain things don't happen. We don't know what was in that photograph, but it made Jeb Bush almost pass out at his father's funeral.
So are you suggesting that when William Barr came out during his confirmation hearings and said, one of my first things I'm going to look at is this plea deal with Jeffrey Epstein? Nothing?
Oh yeah, he's going to look at it, but nothing's going to happen, because he's making sure all the players are satisfied. Nobody goes to prison. Listen, I don't know what was in that photograph, but I would guess that the Israeli Mossad provided President Trump with an extremely damaging, compromising photograph of George Herbert Walker Bush, enough to make his son almost pass out.
Right, and this is the type of things that.
Now that brings us back to
we come back full
Ghislaine
circle.
Maxwell.
Right, we come
Daughter of Robert Maxwell.
All right,
who has
she's
all the goods.
daughter. She's the daughter of this spy I'm talking about. One more thing I want to tell you about Promise Software. All right, Israel's been in charge of it. They've had their hands on it, for 20 years. So there've been some updates. All right.
Promise 2.0.
3.0, 4.0. That's the software they use to track Khashoggi.
Well, oh.
Now do you see how all this is coming together?
Oh my goodness.
That's the software. That's the software that I think Israel is sharing with the Arab countries to sell out the Palestinians.
Well, Robert Maxwell had.
And that brings us back to Jared Kushner.
Yeah.
All right? Just a good Jewish boy working in his father-in-law's White House on behalf of his masters in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem.
Well, Robert Maxwell had 4 kids.
I hope Dr. Michael Brown is watching tonight, and I hope, Dr. Brown, you share this with your audience tonight.
Yes.
Please share it with your audience.
These
I'm
are
dedicating
just the
dedicating this show to Michael Brown tonight.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Okay.
Well, Robert Maxwell ended up having 4 children. He had first a daughter. She kind of left the family, did her own thing. His 2 sons followed him into the business, and then he had a 4th child, Ghislaine, the youngest daughter.
But before we talk about Ghislaine, let's talk about what happened to Robert Maxwell.
Yes.
He fell off his yacht.
Yes.
And drowned in the ocean.
Yes. Completely naked. And so.
Oh, yes, completely naked. All right, he just fell overboard on his yacht, sailing around the Canary Islands.
But there was something he was involved in at the time, right?
Yes, he was trying to get about a $500 million bailout from Israel to save his sinking
Media empire.
empire. The story goes, if I recall from what Gordon Thomas told me, I wish Gordon was still around. He passed away about 2 years ago, and he did not leave me in his will what I asked for, which was his
black book.
I wanted his black. I told him that. I said, I want all your contacts, But the story was that the Israeli Mossad murdered Robert Maxwell to prevent him from talking about his employment with Israel. That he was in desperate condition, desperate need of money. I mean, $500 million.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Financial-
So when you need $500 million, who do you go to? You got to go to somebody that's got a lot of clout, and if they got that kind of money, you're going to have to spill your guts to get that kind of money.
Right.
And you're going to have to switch allegiance. You're going to have to sell them out to go with a new master. Now that brings us back to his daughter Ghislaine.
Yes. So we're making, of course, the supposition there that she's likely a Mossad asset herself. And something interesting about her name, though, Rick, Ghislaine, it's actually, the name itself has meaning. I love names because names have meaning, in the Bible or in real life, because they give a reflection of character.
And this is the second time in less than 2 weeks that Ghislaine has come up. It happened at the microchipping event in Barcelona.
Yes. The name Ghislaine means a vow or a pledge or fulfillment of a deal, a promise, something made in exchange. So we could make the leap, if you will, in saying that maybe at some point in time that Robert Maxwell, when his daughter was born, he made a dedication of her future involvement in the family business, which was not publishing.
So he committed his daughter, he named her Ghislaine, meaning a vow, a pledge,
right.
And he committed his daughter to the crime syndicate.
Right. Actually offered her as a sacrifice to that process.
The yacht that he fell off of naked and drowned was Lady Ghislaine.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Named after his daughter.
Wow. Look, so what is the most, what's the most value to have in these situations. If you with a politician, a banker, or someone of high influence, you want to have that dirt on them, right? Because then you control them.
You photograph them. You photograph them having sex with underage girls or boys,
Right.
and you own them for life.
Right.
So Jeffrey Epstein, he might have been involved with this, with knowing about this, and he got caught. Maybe he was too greedy with it, or he wasn't smart enough and didn't cover his tracks. But if he plays ball, he gets the light sentence. So even though he was found guilty of the most heinous crimes, what happened to him?
He wasn't found guilty of the most heinous crimes. He was found guilty of minor crimes.
Yes.
Okay, even those are heinous, right? But yeah,
Minor infractions.
So-
They only that's the way they worked the deal. The current Secretary of Labor made sure that he was only
slap on the wrist.
slap on the wrist by pleading guilty to minor state Florida statutes, violation of state statutes. So the feds would then shut down the federal investigation into the international crime syndicate, the sex trafficking network, which would lead back to where? Israel.
Right. And so we're making the supposition that Jeffrey Epstein is not, the mastermind in all
No,
this.
it's Mossad.
He was being handled by Mossad.
Absolutely.
His handler was Ghislaine Maxwell.
So you have Jeffrey Epstein, who's Jewish.
Yes.
His attorney, Alan Dershowitz, Jewish. Okay. His madam, Ghislaine, is Jewish. This looks like a Jewish mafia operation. And Ghislaine is the connection to the Mossad.
And we go back to the Bush funeral. Well, maybe Ghislaine had a picture to show.
That's what I am putting out as
Something was
my
on
theory. That look, I think Robert Mueller was getting extremely close to indicting Donald Trump Jr. And this thing was getting very, very close.
The heat was turned up.
Donald Trump had to pull out the Trump card. I think Israel provided the Trump card. And whether Donald Trump knows what was in it or not, Israel had the photograph. Okay? They had something. There was a photograph in that envelope that made the Bush children almost pass out in the funeral. That was their way of saying, don't mess with us. We'll take you down. And so suddenly, Robert Mueller packs up. Hey, I'm going to call it quits. I'm going to write my report, and I'm not going to release the report. And William P. Barr is suddenly going to become the Attorney General. And guess what I read today? Alan Dershowitz, he volunteered to write the introduction of the Mueller report.
Well,
Wow.
What a nice man.
Oh, there's another player in here. Another lawyer involved with Epstein, Kenneth Starr.
Oh, good old Ken.
Now, what's his
The
connection?
special prosecutor who investigated Bill Clinton's relationship with Monica Lewinsky.
Another sex case.
And he's connected to Jeffrey Epstein.
Or with Monica Lewinsky.
The whole Starr
than just a sex
investigation.
case.
It proves that the Starr investigation of Bill Clinton was a hoax.
Right.
What was Bill Clinton's real crimes? Selling American national security secrets to China.
It wasn't sex in the Oval
No.
Office.
But Monica Lewinsky was most likely the Mossad agent in the White House.
Yes.
She's Jewish.
The documentary from Al Jazeera, The Lobby, which we showed some snippets last week, in that you'll see how entrenched they have these operatives, you could say, in school. They raise them up in colleges, and they put them in positions, and they put them all throughout the government, all throughout the media. Monica Lewinsky could have been that operative right there, and went and got some dirt.
Absolutely. How did she meet Bill Clinton, get a job as an intern in the White House? Chandra Levy. There's another one.
Another one.
All right. Gary Condit, Congressman Gary
Yes.
Condit. He's on the House Intelligence Committee. What happened to Chandra Levy? Her body showed up dead in a park. All right. Why was she taken out? Nobody knows. I've always wondered whether Chandra Levy was an Israeli spy and somebody in maybe the U.S. intelligence world took her out.
Or Mossad took her out in order to put pressure on Gary Condit because of his relationship on the Senate and Intelligence Committee.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of a lot of play in that. So
The bottom line is the Jeffrey Epstein story
Yes.
is extremely deep. Major players, big, powerful, rich, influential players.
Who's who? There was a Prince Andrew is photographed.
Prince Andrew, yes. But they cannot allow the lid to come off because it blows out of the water the whole Israeli spy operation. All the politicians that are involved, all the media people that are involved. It blows it all out. They can't let it happen. So if you're all thinking that, oh, hey, this is going to be bigger than Pizzagate and all the truth is going to come out right now about it's not going to come out.
no.
Not
This will
going
be
to come out.
This will be all the truth. You'll hear about
Yes.
it right here.
That's it. Some of those girls will start disappearing.
I think one already has. I think one was found in a hotel in Palm Beach.
Yes. Another Arkansas.
And we just went through this in Palm Beach and Vero, the sex sting that wrangled in Bob Kraft. Remember that?
Yes, from the New England Patriots.
Right. There was other names that were said to be much bigger than him.
Yes. But
Where are they at?
Never reported, was it?
It's been a couple weeks now.
In fact, there's been some high-powered law firms that have set up shop here in Florida in the past 2 weeks that are fighting to keep the video releases suppressed. And the reason why is because there are some other names that are yet to be released. They don't want those videos out.
2 billionaires living here in Vero Beach
Yes.
who were arrested for participating in sex trafficking at these massage parlors in Vero Beach and down through the Treasure Coast all the way down to Jupiter. And that's where Kraft was busted, in Jupiter.
The Palm Beach area.
Yes.
Where all this.
But what we were hearing 2 weeks ago in the local press is hundreds of names.
Yes.
Big
Names, bigger than Kraft is going to be released, and it's all gone.
Where is that?
Where are the stories? Where are the names? Where are they haven't even, no one's been arrested since the big guy, a couple big guys. Several billionaires arrested in a sex trafficking operation. Do you know those girls that were here in these massage parlors here in Vero Beach and Jupiter? From what I read in the press reports, they were living in the facility.
They were living there.
That was their home. They were sleeping on the floor.
A lot of times
They were cooking out behind the building.
Yeah,
And nobody saw this.
Well, a lot of times they're here and they have to work off how they they have to work there to pay off their debt.
They're
They become
slaves.
Debted slaves.
Indentured servants.
The sex industry.
And just in the Indian River County alone, the county we're in, 172 arrest warrants. 172
Yes.
of patrons of these.
But have they
facilities.
all been served?
That I don't know.
Because the news has gone away.
Where's the big ones? They said they were big names. Where are they at?
Okay, but can we go back to
Yes.
involving that case?
Yes.
A Kraft. Who are some of the attorneys that are now in this case? I thought I saw some names here today. Some very powerful names have come into this Florida case. Let me see here. Oh, here it is. This is a Daily Business Review. New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft isn't pulling punches and assembling his defense from prostitution charges. Kraft hired William Bill Burke of Quinn Emanuel Urquhart and Sullivan's Washington office. Burke's career spans 2 decades, graduate of Yale, a law clerk for Anthony Kennedy, prosecutor for the Southern District of New York. Let's see. Now here, listen to this. Mr. Burke joined the federal government, first as a senior official with the Department of Justice, then special counsel and deputy counsel to George W. Bush. He came into the Brett Kavanaugh hearings, defending Mr. Kavanaugh. Burke also represents President Donald Trump's former White House counsel, Donald McGahn, as well as Breitbart news
That's where I've
editor
seen the names
Yeah.
Steve Bannon. In addition to Burke, Robert Kraft has also retained the services of West Palm Beach lawyer Jack Goldberger.
Goldberger and Weiss.
Attleboro, Goldberger, and Weiss, the law firm, who has come under scrutiny for his role in the defense team for Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh,
That's what I'm trying to get to.
There you go.
A long way to get to that part right there.
well, it's all connected.
So the big lawyers are rushing into Florida right now to defend the billionaires who got caught by the county sheriffs.
And then they start bribing the judges, or they start talking to them, sweetening the deal. It's amazing.
Or, hey, you can chalk up a win here
Yeah.
on this deal.
Yeah.
You know, just a light sentence, but you
Yes.
got to win.
Yeah, that's right.
Just
That's
like
right. It's over.
Alex Acosta
All right.
did.
And
with
maybe
Jeffrey
you'll
Epstein.
get a cabinet position. Do a great
You never
job.
know.
Well, should we go into our third hour?
Hey, listen, I think we did enough damage here showing people how rotten this thing is.